Welcome to the Greenway with Mac, a channel dedicated to active transportation. This video picks up where we left off at the Bay Bridge Trail to the observation pier. If you did not watch that one and want to watch the route from Emeryville, then click the link above. The original Eastern Span saw some things in its day, so stick around to hear how it handled plane crashes, earthquakes, and threats of terrorism before this one finally replaced it. The San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge doesn't receive the same attention as its more famous neighbor to the west, but this one is the real workhorse in the region. 1/3 of all California state-owned bridge traffic is right here. The distance from the foot of the bridge to the lookout point at Yerba Buena Island is 2.3 miles. If you take the newly opened path down to the Treasure Island Ferry Terminal, then you'll add just under a mile. And I'll cover that section specifically at the end, showing you why it's not recommended for everyone. Down below is the observation pier that is built using the foundations from the old bridge. Don't skip this stop, especially if you're not a local. The view of the bridge from down there is really unique. The grade of this 15-foot wide path is 2%. I've done it a few times, and on everything from an old Schwinn, to a folding bike, to an acoustic cargo bike with a toddler on the back. The view doesn't change a whole lot, so it feels longer than it really is, but the return trip is exhilarating. Note that there is a speed limit of 15 miles per hour. This path is open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., so you'll need to plan your ride during the day. Scooters, skates, and skateboards are not allowed on the trail, and they say that the Highway Patrol monitors the trail on bikes. This new span of the Bay Bridge was needed following the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. On October 17th, just before the San Francisco Giants and Oakland A's were preparing to face each other in the World Series, a 6.9 earthquake violently shook the region. The double-decker cantilever bridge shifted 7 inches and sheared off some bolts, which caused a 50-foot upper section to collapse onto the lower one. The western span is a suspension bridge, which was able to move and be more resilient against an earthquake. This section was more like an erector set, and its inability to move proved fatal. In the long term, officials needed to determine whether to retrofit or replace the bridge. Estimates to replace the bridge were not significantly higher at the time than the retrofit, and replacement had a much longer lifespan. Originally, the bridge was expected to open in 2007 at an estimated cost of $250 million. The process was hindered by a slew of issues such as engineering challenges, politics, and problems sourcing the materials. The bridge was finished 6 years later than planned, with a final price tag of $6.5 billion, a 2,500% cost overrun, which was California's most expensive construction project ever at the time. The bridge closure did have a silver lining for current residents of the Bay region. Ferry service was restored between San Francisco and the East Bay, connecting at Oakland Jack London Square and Alameda Main Street. The city of Alameda managed the operation using boats from the Red and White Fleet. The service was really successful, and the state of California saw the value in having a backup service in case the bridges or tunnels were ever shut down again. They established what is now the Water Emergency Transportation Agency, which owns and manages the ferry routes. These ferries remain hugely popular due to their usefulness and for being the most enjoyable form of moving on the bay. One day I'll make a video about this service because the ferries are very bike-friendly and open up many more areas to car-free travel. The earthquake was not the first time that the Eastern Span was tested for integrity. In 1968, a U.S. Navy training aircraft departed Naval Air Station Alameda in the fog and struck the bridge about 15 feet above the upper roadway. The plane sank on the north side of the bridge, and both people on board were killed. Luckily, nobody on the bridge was injured. They did have to replace a damaged truss section. 2 months after 9/11, Governor Gray Davis revealed threats of a rush hour attack on one of the West Coast's suspension bridges. The 4 bridges that met this criteria were the Vincent Thomas in Long Beach, the Coronado in the San Diego area, the Golden Gate, and the western span of the Bay Bridge. In response, crews hardened the suspension cable attachment points, which they learned to be a vulnerability. In the end, no attack was made on any of them. The design of the new span is a single-towered, self-anchored suspension bridge. This means that the main cable's attached to the bridge deck rather than the ground. This design is what makes it unique, but also contributed to the complexity and cost. The toll to drive across the bridge is $8 on weekdays and $7 on weekends. In 2025, it will go up $1 more. When it opened in 1936, the toll was 65 cents, which is now equivalent to almost $14. You also had to pay the toll in each direction. So if you ever hear somebody complaining about the toll, remind them they're getting a pretty good deal. Plus, how else are they going to pay back the $6.5 billion they spent for it? Construction of the original bridge started in July of 1933, 6 months after work began on the Golden Gate. However, the Bay Bridge was finished 6 months before the Golden Gate, which opened in May of 1937. Originally, there were key system trains that ran on the lower level of the Bay Bridge, but were removed in 1963 as cars became more popular. We were actually here when the East Bay Bicycle Coalition organized the first ride on the bridge in 2013. Over 1,000 people caravanned from the West Oakland BART station to be a part of the celebration. Personally, this was the moment when I learned about bicycle advocacy organizations and the work that they did. I saw that I wasn't alone in my appreciation for projects that support an active lifestyle. Alex Zuckerman is credited for persuading Caltrans to build this path, which now bears his name. Zuckerman also advocated for bike access on the Carquinez, Dumbarton, and Richmond-San Rafael bridges. He was an Oakland city planner and the founder of the East Bay Bicycle Coalition, which has now become Bike East Bay. These projects show what's possible when organizations have a vision and flex their muscle to fight for local, state, and federal dollars to get these projects built. If you are local, then consider supporting Bike East Bay. If you are not from the area, then consider supporting your local organization. Your donations to these groups go far in supporting safer streets, cleaner air, and healthier lifestyles for everyone. This path initially didn't reach the island, and locals joked that it was the world's longest bike pier. But now you can reach the island, and they've recently completed the path down to Treasure Island, which is open from sunrise to sundown. Let's take a quick look at the view back towards the East Bay, and then we will finish the ride down to the Treasure Island Ferry Terminal. This was my very first time being here since the path was opened, so I was learning the route along with you on this final stretch. I had imagined it was a gentle decline all the way down to Treasure Island, so I was surprised to see these uphill sections. The signage was pretty good, so even though the path crosses the road a couple of times, I was able to stay with the path as intended. We are currently on Yerba Buena Island, which is a natural island. Treasure Island is an artificial one that was built from 1936 to 37 for the Golden Gate International Exposition. This was a World's Fair that was celebrating its newly completed Bay and Golden Gate bridges. Treasure Island is 393 acres of dirt and rock that covered up a rather shallow portion of the bay, which was a hazard for ships. The original plan for the island was for it to become a second San Francisco airport, but the US's involvement in World War II changed those plans. The Navy processed 12,000 men a day for their assignments in the Pacific. The base was used in one form or another until 1997, when it was finally closed. A lot of the old buildings have been repurposed into things like TV and film sound stages. The Matrix's bullet time scene was filmed here. You may recognize some of the buildings as well. Treasure Island Administration Building 1 was the Berlin airport in the film Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Its location right across the street from the ferry terminal is the PIM Technologies building from Marvel's Ant-Man. This grade is really steep. I had Lucas on the back and was riding the brakes pretty hard. Riding down to the island is only recommended for advanced riders. Eventually, a two-way protected cycle track on Treasure Island Road, which circles the other side of Yerba Buena Island, will be built and make the trips up and down a lot less steep. If you are planning to return home on the Bay Bridge, then take note of that path on the other side of the street. The grade is so steep that they actually built switchbacks to get back up the hill. We decided to catch the ferry to San Francisco before boarding another one back to the East Bay. The Embarcadero BART is not far from the ferry building, so returning to most places in the Bay Area is not too difficult. You can also take a Muni bus into San Francisco, and soon there should be AC Transit buses back to the East Bay. I was really impressed with the bike path once we got down here. The path was wide and concrete protected from the road. This is a great view of the island, and I felt like the city had rolled out the green carpet for us. The city of San Francisco purchased Treasure Island from the Navy for $105 million and is in the process of building residences for about 20,000 people over the next few decades. This area looks a lot different than it did 5 years ago when I was last here, and it seems like more change is coming. It'll be exciting to see how the island develops in the coming years, and I see a ton of potential. The ferry was $5 per person, and it runs about once an hour. I have a link to the ferry service in the description so you can plan your trip in advance. A bonus to using the ferry is that you'll end at the San Francisco Ferry Building, which is a great place to grab a snack, to rest, and enjoy the city. I've just started to scratch the surface in covering Bay Area greenways, so click subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one. I'll see you on the next bridge ride.